When I began to look at topics for my action research project, I noticed several things in my classes. Students often were apathetic about whatever we were discussing in class. Shy students didn't really want to give their opinion because they didn't want to do it in front of the whole class. There was also a survey that was sent out by ECU in order to gain money for the school for technology, and there was a low student response throughout the whole school. I chose blogging to increase participation because I felt like it would give students a place to reflect, it would encourage them to be writing in art class, and it would give the students that were uncomfortable talking in front of the whole class a chance to give their opinion. I, as a preliminary activity, gave my Art 1 students a line-know-it activity where I asked them a question and they gave a positive response, with at least 80% of the students that never respond to class discussions responding. As I began to review the literature, there were several things that I noticed, several themes running throughout. One was using blogging as a collaboration tool within classrooms. Another theme was blogging for reflection purposes, so the students could reflect on what they had learned or they could reflect about their own personal lives. And the last theme was blogging as a framework for learning, because blogging was done in a variety of classroom settings. I believe that my action research project has a lot to contribute to the body of literature concerning blogging and participation in classrooms. I believe it shows that with the proper scaffolding and guidelines, blogging can be used as a tool to increase participation. My action research shows problems that teachers may encounter when they use blogging in their classroom. And it also shows how film can be connected to artworks to teach students about the elements and principles of design. As I began to consider what kind of topics my students would want to blog about, I explored several different sites, including the MoMA Pop Art site. And I looked at exhibits at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Initially, I had set up a blogger site for my students to use for the blog site. But after I looked at it at school, I discovered you could look at one, but you couldn't post comments on one. So I changed to Tumblr because you could post images on Tumblr, and it wasn't blocked at school. After looking at the 20 to 25 different sources, I focused on 12 different sources to focus my research on. And then, after learning about the ADDIE process during month 5, I was able to take my ideas and put them into more concrete form. I was able to create Google Doc surveys to get the basic information from students, as well as to find out their comfort level with blogging, with participating in class, and how often they were online and what they were online for. At the end of Cycle 1, I decided to have open-ended questions on the survey to find out why students weren't blogging as often as I had asked them to, any suggestions they could give me on what to do to keep them interested, and if I included films, how would they respond to that. I only created a post-survey for Cycle 2 because the students participating were the same, other than 2 students left the research. In the survey for the second cycle, I was able to find out how the students had felt overall through all the cycles, as well as how their participation comfort level had changed. Initially, I had discovered that about half the students participating felt comfortable discussing art in class, while the other half either felt they didn't understand, they didn't care, or they were too shy to make comments during oral class discussions. In Cycle 1, I had students participate in several activities. that involved them in visiting several art websites, choosing artwork, and then making their own comments about it. It was very open-ended. I had a lot of difficulty getting students to post regularly. In fact, some weeks they didn't post at all. After the first cycle, I decided to ask students through the post survey why they didn't blog and things that would have motivated them to blog. Based on the students' responses, during cycle 2, I included short films as well as having more guided questions that related art elements and principles to the design principles used in film. I think by doing this, students were better able to understand what I was looking for in their responses, and it engaged them by having the short films. Students posted more consistently, not as often as I would like them to have posted, but they still posted more consistently than the previous cycle. Over 2/3 of the students during the second cycle said that they would rather have a blog post to do than have an oral discussion in class about art. And then 1/3 of the students said that they would rather have an oral discussion, but those are the more extroverted, outspoken students in the class regardless. In emerging technologies in a collaborative culture, I learned a lot about Web 2.0 tools and how I can use them in my classroom. For example, learning about Linoit helped to shape my action research project. In music theories and education applications, I was able to further learn how to use GarageBand so that I could create my own soundtracks and avoid copyright issues in my classroom. In filmmaking principles and education, I was able to get a better grasp on digital storytelling and a greater understanding of what goes into creating films. In game strategies and motivation, I learned to think about what makes students drawn to games, what it is about games that help them to learn, and to think about using games in my classroom for problem solving, creative thinking, and game design. In learning management systems and organization, I learned about learning management systems using Schoology, but I think that I will get a better grasp on using what my school system uses in grade now that I understand the whole purpose of a learning management system. In media asset creation, I was able to learn a lot about Creative Commons and copyright, because as an art teacher, as being a teacher period, that's very important to know about. I was also able to get my paper ready to be published. I've submitted it to the Studies in Art Education, and I have to wait 6 weeks to find out if it will be published with them. How does the creation of my RP help me to prepare for the future? Well, it helps me to be more reflective in my practices and what's going on in my classes, to take a deeper look at my lessons. It helps me to become more tech savvy and to want to stay on top of the technologies going on. It helps me to come up with ways to engage my students. It helps me to be able to teach other teachers how to use blogging and Web 2.0 tools in their classrooms through PLCs and professional learning communities. Also, after using blogging for an assignment, after I completed my second cycle using a WordPress site, the students were interested to see what their classmates had written, so I plan to use a combination of WordPress and Tumblr in future classes.